Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of Research Station Kepler 442b, watching through the reinforced viewport as the alien vessel approached. After 3 months of careful negotiations through radio transmissions, this was humanity's first face-to-face contact with an intelligent alien species. The Zephyrians, as they called themselves, had agreed to a meeting on the neutral ground of humanity's remote research station orbiting a gas giant in the Kepler system. Sarah's heart raced as she observed the graceful, crystalline ship gliding silently through space. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury, reflecting the orange glow of the nearby star. The vessel was beautiful in a way that made human engineering look crude and primitive by comparison. "They're requesting permission to dock," announced Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb from the communications console. His voice carried the tension that everyone on the station felt. This moment would determine whether humanity would gain peaceful allies or face a new threat among the stars. "Permission granted," replied Captain Elena Rodriguez, the station commander. "Direct them to Docking Bay 3. All personnel maintain Protocol 7. No sudden movements, no weapons, and remember, we're representing all of humanity here." Sarah adjusted her translator device and checked her tablet containing the basic Zephyrian language patterns they had learned during the radio exchanges. As the station's lead xenobiologist, she would be part of the first contact team alongside Captain Rodriguez and Dr. James Mitchell, their linguist. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. Through the station's internal monitors, Sarah watched as the alien vessel merged seamlessly with their docking bay, its hull flowing like water to create a perfect seal. The technology was far beyond anything humans had achieved. "Life support readings are stable in the docking bay," reported Ensign Parr from the environmental controls. "Atmosphere is compatible with human physiology. The aliens appear to have adjusted their environment to match ours." Captain Rodriguez stood and straightened her dress uniform. "Contact team, prepare for first contact. Remember, we go in peace and with open minds." As they walked through the station corridors toward the docking bay, Sarah reflected on humanity's journey to this moment. It had been only 50 years since humans developed faster-than-light travel, and already they had encountered their first alien intelligence. The Zephyrians had responded to humanity's deep space probes with mathematical sequences that proved their intelligence, leading to months of painstaking communication efforts. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. Beyond lay a corridor that seemed to be made of the same flowing, crystalline material as the ship's exterior. Soft blue light emanated from within the walls themselves, creating an ethereal atmosphere that felt both alien and oddly peaceful. 3 figures waited for them in what appeared to be a reception chamber. Sarah's breath caught as she saw the Zephyrians for the first time in person. They were tall and graceful, standing nearly 7 feet in height. Their skin had a translucent quality with a faint blue-silver luminescence, and their large eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. Most striking were the delicate, wing-like structures that extended from their backs, not for flight, Sarah realized, but likely for some form of energy manipulation or communication. The central Zephyrian stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Veltar, speaker for this expedition. We welcome this historic meeting between our peoples." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward and offered a formal bow. "Greetings, Veltar. I am Captain Elena Rodriguez, representing humanity. We are honored by your presence and hope this meeting begins a long friendship between our species."
The time has come.
The translation worked flawlessly, and Sarah marveled at how quickly the 2 species had developed basic communication. But as she observed the aliens more closely, she noticed something troubling. The Zephyrian to Veltar's left, introduced as Kethmar, seemed to be experiencing some form of distress. The being's luminescence flickered irregularly, and its large eyes darted nervously around the human delegation. "Is your companion unwell?" Dr. Mitchell asked with genuine concern. Veltar's expression shifted, the first clear emotional response Sarah had observed. Kethmar is our most gifted telepath. They have been experiencing some difficulty since we approached your station. Your minds appear to be different than we expected. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Telepaths. The Zephyrians possessed abilities that humans had only dreamed of in science fiction. But if their telepath was having trouble, what did that mean for peaceful contact? Different how? Captain Rodriguez asked carefully. Before Veltar could respond, Kethmar suddenly stepped forward. Their voice was strained when they spoke. May I attempt to make contact with one of you? To understand? Your thoughts are so strange, so loud and chaotic, yet somehow beautiful. Sarah found herself stepping forward before she fully realized what she was doing. Something about Kethmar's distress called to her scientific curiosity. I volunteer, she said, ignoring Captain Rodriguez's sharp look. Kethmar approached slowly, their luminescence pulsing more rapidly. Simply remain calm. I will touch your mind gently, just to understand the nature of human consciousness. The alien's hand rose towards Sarah's face, fingers spread wide. As the delicate digits came within inches of her forehead, Sarah noticed Kethmar's eyes widening with what looked like surprise, then confusion, then growing alarm. Your mind, Kethmar whispered. It's so... The alien's hand made contact with Sarah's temple. What happened next would be debated and analyzed for decades to come. The moment Kethmar's consciousness touched Sarah's mind, the alien telepath let out a sound that could only be described as a psychic scream. The noise wasn't audible in the traditional sense, but every person in the room felt it as a spike of pure terror and anguish driven directly into their thoughts. Kethmar stumbled backward, their form flickering and destabilizing like a broken hologram. The other Zephyrians rushed to support their companion, speaking rapidly in their own language as Kethmar continued to emit waves of psychic distress. What happened? Captain Rodriguez demanded, but Sarah was too stunned to respond immediately. She had felt it too. A brief moment when her mind had been exposed to something vast and alien, and in that same instant she had sensed Kethmar's absolute terror. Veltar turned to the humans, their expression grave. This has never happened before. Kethmar has touched the minds of 17 different species across the galaxy. Never has there been such a violent reaction. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, his scientific training overriding diplomatic protocol. What exactly did Kethmar experience? We need to understand what went wrong if we're going to prevent this from happening again. The third Zephyrian, who had been silent until now, spoke with a voice heavy with concern. I am Inael Vesh, a mind healer. Kethmar's consciousness has been damaged. They are experiencing what you might call psychic trauma. The contact with the human mind has left them in a state of severe shock. Sarah felt a wave of guilt wash over her. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Is there anything we can do to help? Veltar exchanged a long look with Inael Vesh before responding. We must return Kethmar to our ship immediately for treatment. But first, we must understand, what is the nature of human consciousness that could cause such a reaction? Your species appears to be psychically inert, yet somehow... The speaker paused, struggling to find the words. Kethmar described your mind as being like a star, brilliant and burning with such intensity that direct contact was unbearable. But more than that, they sense something dark within human consciousness, something that exists in every sentient mind but burns far brighter in humans than in any species we have encountered. What kind of something? Captain Rodriguez asked, though Sarah suspected she wouldn't like the answer. Inael Vesh answered, their voice barely above a whisper. Violence, aggression, the capacity for destruction on a scale that defies comprehension. Your species' thoughts are saturated with it, not as conscious intent, but as fundamental potential. Kethmar has never encountered minds that carry such intensity of destructive capability. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Sarah felt her heart sinking as she realized what this meant for human-alien relations. Humanity's first contact with an alien species, and they had accidentally traumatized their telepath simply by being human. Captain Rodriguez maintained her diplomatic composure, but Sarah could see the strain in her expression. We deeply regret any harm that has come to Kethmar. Humans are a young species still learning to control our more aggressive impulses. We had hoped that contact with other intelligent species would help us grow beyond our violent nature. Veltar's luminescence dimmed slightly. Perhaps there's hope in that. The fact that you recognize these impulses and seek to overcome them suggests wisdom. But we must care for Kethmar now. We request permission to withdraw to our ship. Of course, Captain Rodriguez replied immediately. Please, take whatever time you need. We'll remain available for communication when you're ready. As the Zephyrians helped their injured companion back toward their ship, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just failed its most important test. The image of Kethmar's terror-filled eyes would haunt her dreams for weeks to come. Once the aliens had withdrawn to their vessel, the human delegation gathered in the station's conference room. The mood was somber as they tried to process what had just occurred. Recommendations? Captain Rodriguez asked, though her tone suggested she already feared what the team would say. Dr. Mitchell spoke first. From a linguistic perspective, the communication was successful, but the telepathic contact reveals a fundamental incompatibility that we never anticipated. If human consciousness is inherently traumatic to telepathic species, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah picked up the thought. Then we may be alone in the universe by default. Any species advanced enough for interstellar travel might also have developed telepathic abilities. If they all react to us the way Kethmar did, we could become pariahs among galactic civilization before we're even invited to join, Captain Rodriguez concluded grimly. Lieutenant Commander Webb had been monitoring communications throughout the incident. Captain, I'm detecting increased activity from the Zephyrian ship. Energy readings are fluctuating wildly. It's possible they're preparing to leave. Sarah stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the alien vessel. Its beautiful, flowing surface now seemed to pulse with agitation, colors shifting rapidly across its hull like the skin of a distressed chameleon. There has to be something we can do, Sarah said, more to herself than to the others. Some way to prove that we're not the monsters Kethmar saw in my mind. Captain Rodriguez joined her at the viewport. The question is whether they'll give us that chance. If word spreads to other species that contact with humans causes psychic trauma, then we'll be quarantined, Dr. Mitchell finished. Cut off from galactic civilization indefinitely. As if summoned by their dark predictions, Webb's communication console chimed with an incoming message. It's from a Zephyrian ship, he announced. Audio only. Veltar's voice filled the room, but it sounded different now, distant and formal. Humans of Earth, Kethmar's condition has stabilized, but they remain in a state of deep meditation to recover from the psychic shock. We have discussed your species at length, and we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. The humans exchanged worried glances as Veltar continued. Never before have we encountered a species whose very thoughts could wound one of our telepaths. The Council of Minds will need to be informed of this development. However, we do not wish to condemn your species based on a single encounter. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Perhaps all was not lost. We propose a solution, Veltar said. We will remain in this system for 7 of your days to observe your species from a safe distance. During this time, we ask that you demonstrate your civilization's capacity for peace, growth, and wisdom. Show us that the darkness Kethmar sensed is not the defining characteristic of humanity. Captain Rodriguez responded immediately. We accept your proposal and thank you for this opportunity. How would you like us to demonstrate these qualities? There was a pause before Veltar replied. That choice is yours to make. But know this. The method you choose will be as important as the outcome. We will observe not just what you do, but how and why you do it. The transmission ended, leaving the humans alone with the weight of their species' future on their shoulders. Sarah looked around the room at her colleagues, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They had 7 days to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Well, Captain Rodriguez said with grim humor, no pressure. But Sarah was already formulating plans. She thought about Earth, about the billions of humans living their daily lives in relative peace, about the scientists working to cure diseases, the artists creating beauty, the ordinary people showing kindness to strangers. Surely, there was a way to show the Zephyrians that side of humanity. The challenge would be finding a demonstration meaningful enough to overcome the psychic trauma of their first contact. As Sarah began outlining her ideas, she couldn't help but wonder what other species in the galaxy thought about when they encountered something that frightened them. Did they run, fight, or try to understand? For humanity's sake, she hoped the Zephyrians were the type to try to understand. Sarah spent the next 18 hours in what could only be described as a controlled frenzy of activity. Her small quarters aboard Research Station Kepler 442b had been transformed into a command center filled with data tablets, communication equipment, and holographic displays showing Earth in real time. She had contacted every major institution on humanity's homeworld, from universities to humanitarian organizations, from space agencies to children's hospitals. The plan she had conceived was ambitious and risky. Rather than trying to hide humanity's violent nature, she would embrace it, but frame it in a way that showed how humans had learned to channel their aggressive instincts toward positive ends. The demonstration she envisioned would require unprecedented cooperation across Earth, and she had less than 6 days to make it happen. Captain Rodriguez entered Sarah's quarters carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of cautious optimism. The response from Earth has been incredible, she said, handing Sarah a steaming mug. Every major government has agreed to participate. The UN Security Council passed a resolution in record time. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. She hadn't slept since the incident with Kethmar, and exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. What about the private organizations? Even better than expected, Rodriguez replied. The major corporations, research institutions, and NGOs are all on board. When people learned that humanity's future in space depended on this demonstration, the response was overwhelming. Dr. Martinez from the Global Peace Initiative called it the most unified humanity has been since the asteroid crisis of 2157. Sarah nodded, remembering that event from her history classes. An extinction-level asteroid had been detected heading for Earth, and humanity had just 48 hours to mount a defense. The crisis had brought together nations, corporations, and individuals in a way that peacetime never had. The asteroid had been successfully diverted, but the cooperation forged during those critical hours had reshaped human civilization. Are the Zephyrians monitoring our communications? Sarah asked. Undoubtedly, Rodriguez confirmed. Their technology is far more advanced than ours. They're probably aware of everything we're planning. Sarah actually smiled at this news. Good. I want them to see how we organize, how we make decisions as a species when faced with a crisis. The process might be as important as the outcome. Lieutenant Commander Webb's voice came over the comm system. Dr. Chun, Captain Rodriguez, please report to the observation deck. The Zephyrians are doing something. They hurried through the station corridors to the observation deck, where Webb was monitoring sensor readings while staring out at the alien vessel. The Zephyrian ship had changed position during the night, moving closer to the station and deploying what appeared to be sensor arrays in all directions. They've been scanning everything, Webb explained. Not just our station, but the entire system. Energy signatures, gravitational fluctuations, even quantum field variations. It's like they're building a detailed map of local space-time. Dr. Mitchell joined them, tablet in hand. I've been analyzing the communication patterns from their ship. The linguistic algorithms suggest they're in contact with other vessels, possibly reporting back to their homeworld or fleet. Sarah felt a chill. How many other ships? Unknown, Mitchell replied. But the quantum entanglement signatures suggest real-time communication across vast distances. Whatever they're reporting, it's being received immediately by recipients who could be anywhere in the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez studied the alien vessel through the viewport. Dr. Chun, how confident are you that your demonstration will work? Sarah wished she could give a definitive answer, but scientific honesty compelled her to be truthful. Captain, what we're attempting has never been tried before. We're essentially trying to prove that humanity's capacity for violence can be transformed into a force for creation and protection. The psychology behind it is sound, but we're dealing with aliens whose entire understanding of consciousness is different from ours, Rodriguez finished. They experience minds directly through telepathy. They might not understand metaphor or symbolic gestures the way humans do. Webb turned from his console. There's something else. I'm detecting unusual quantum fluctuations around the Zephyrian ship. The patterns are similar to what we observed during Kethmar psychotrauma. I think their telepath is still active, somehow. The implications of this hit Sarah immediately. They might be monitoring our thoughts from a distance. If Kethmar has recovered enough to use their abilities safely, they could be observing human consciousness across the entire system. Dr. Mitchell looked alarmed. But if human thoughts are traumatic to them, why would they risk it? Because they're scientists too, Sarah realized. They're trying to understand us, just like we're trying to understand them. The question is whether they can maintain enough psychological distance to study us without being harmed. An alert tone sounded from Webb's console. Incoming transmission from Earth Control. The demonstration is ready to begin. Sarah's heart rate accelerated. After 40 hours of frantic coordination, humanity was about to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. The plan she had conceived would unfold over the next 3 days, demonstrating different aspects of human nature in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Put on the main screen, Rodriguez ordered. The display lit up with a view of Earth from orbit, its blue surface marbled with white clouds. But today something was different. Across the planet's surface, lights were beginning to appear. Not the usual glow of cities, but new patterns of illumination that spelled out mathematical equations, artistic designs, and messages of peace in dozens of languages. Phase 1 has begun, announced Dr. Sarah Kim, the coordinator on Earth. Every major population center is participating. We estimate over 4 billion people are involved in creating these light patterns. Sarah watched in amazement as the display showed humanity working together on a scale never before achieved. In New York, every building in Manhattan had been synchronized to create a massive mathematical proof, the solution to a problem that had puzzled Zephyrian scientists based on their earlier communications. In Tokyo, millions of people with light sources were forming a beautiful fractal pattern visible from orbit. Across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, similar demonstrations are taking place simultaneously. The energy expenditure alone is staggering, Webb observed. They're diverting power from industrial processes, transportation systems, even life support in some space habitats. This must be costing billions of credits. That's exactly the point, Sarah explained. We're showing the Zephyrians that humans are willing to sacrifice immediate material gain for a greater purpose. Every kilowatt being used for these displays is energy not being used for economic production. Dr. Mitchell was studying the linguistic patterns in the messages being displayed across Earth. The multilingual nature is particularly clever. We're demonstrating that humanity is not a single monolithic culture, but thousands of diverse groups choosing to cooperate despite their differences. As they watched, the light patterns on Earth began to shift and evolve. The mathematical proofs were being solved in real time by crowds of people working together. The artistic displays grew more complex as participants added their own contributions. Most impressively, the messages of peace began to interconnect across continents, forming a global web of communication. Phase 2 will begin in 6 hours, Dr. Kim reported. We're moving to the demonstration of channeled aggression. This was the part of Sarah's plan that had generated the most debate during the planning sessions. Rather than hiding humanity's violent nature, she wanted to show how humans had learned to redirect their aggressive instincts toward positive ends. The demonstration would involve competitive sports, but on a scale never before attempted. Are you sure about this? Rodriguez asked quietly. Showing them our competitive nature might reinforce their fears about human violence. Sarah understood the concern, but she was convinced this was the right approach. Captain, the worst thing we could do is lie to them. Kethmar has already seen the darkness in human consciousness. Pretending it doesn't exist won't fool telepaths. But if we can show them how we've learned to control and channel those impulses. Her explanation was interrupted by an urgent chime from Webb's console. New transmission from the Zephyrian ship. Veltar's voice filled the observation deck, but there was something different about it now, a note of wonder that hadn't been there before. Humans of Earth, we have been observing your planetary display. The coordination you have achieved is remarkable. The mathematical proofs you have created are elegant solutions to problems our greatest minds have pondered for centuries. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but Veltar wasn't finished. However, we must confess confusion about your methods. The energy expenditure for this display could have powered your planet's industrial processes for days. Your people have voluntarily reduced their standard of living to create these patterns. This behavior does not align with our understanding of survival-driven consciousness. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward to respond. Speaker Veltar, humans often choose to sacrifice immediate benefits for long-term goals or symbolic purposes. We call it investing in the future or making sacrifices for principles we believe in. We are familiar with this concept, Veltar replied slowly. But the scale of your coordination suggests a level of collective consciousness that should be impossible for non-telepathic beings. How do you achieve such unity of purpose without direct mental connection? Dr. Mitchell couldn't resist answering this question. Through communication, shared values, and trust. We use technology, language, and cultural institutions to create bonds between minds that function similarly to telepathic connections. There was a long pause before Veltar responded. Kethmar wishes to attempt another contact. The trauma from our first encounter has changed them. They believe they now understand the nature of human consciousness better. They request permission to try again. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The memory of Kethmar's psychic scream was still fresh in her mind. Is it safe? For both of us. Kethmar has been modified. Our mind healers have created psychic barriers to protect them from the intensity of human thought. The contact will be limited and carefully controlled. Captain Rodriguez looked at Sarah with obvious concern. Dr. Chun, you don't have to do this. We can find another volunteer. But Sarah knew it had to be her. She was the one who had caused the original trauma, and she was the architect of humanity's demonstration. If anyone was going to risk another psychic contact, it should be her. I agree to the attempt, Sarah said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. But I want medical teams standing by on both sides. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself back in the docking bay, facing Kethmar once again. The Zephyrian telepath looked different now. Their luminescence was dimmer and more controlled, and there were new crystalline formations along their temples that Sarah assumed were the protective modifications Veltar had mentioned. I must apologize for my previous reaction, Kethmar said, their voice carrying notes of embarrassment and curiosity. Your mind was unlike anything I had ever encountered. The intensity of thought, the complexity of emotional structure, the sheer volume of simultaneous processes, it was overwhelming. Sarah nodded understandingly. Human brains are pretty chaotic places. Even we don't fully understand how our own consciousness works. Kethmar's large eyes studied her intently. But that is what fascinates me now. In the aftermath of our contact, as I recovered from the shock, I began to analyze what I had experienced. Your mind contained multitudes, not just violence, as I initially perceived, but creativity, compassion, curiosity, love, fear, hope, anger, joy, all existing simultaneously at incredible intensity. The telepaths stepped closer, their movements more confident than before. I have touched the minds of 17 species across the galaxy. Most possess one or two dominant emotional patterns. The Altarians are primarily logical. The Christians are driven by aesthetic beauty. The Vorthack are motivated by communal harmony. But humans contain the full spectrum of possible consciousness, all burning at maximum intensity. Sarah found this description both flattering and terrifying. Is that why the contact traumatized you? Too much intensity. Partially, Kethmar admitted. But also because I was unprepared for the paradox of human nature. In your mind, I saw the capacity for both ultimate creation and ultimate destruction existing in perfect balance. This should be impossible. Most species evolve toward one or the other, either becoming peaceful creators or efficient destroyers. Humans appear to have evolved toward becoming both simultaneously. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. How is that paradox perceived by telepathic species? Is it seen as dangerous? Kethmar's luminescence flickered as they considered the question. To most telepaths, yes. A mind that can create beauty one moment and contemplate violence the next seems fundamentally unstable. But after observing your planetary display today, I begin to understand that this paradox might be humanity's greatest strength. Sarah felt a spark of hope. What do you mean? Your species' coordination today required both creative thinking and competitive drive. You solved mathematical problems through cooperation, but the urgency came from knowing that failure meant defeat. You created art, but the beauty was enhanced by the challenge of limited time and resources. You demonstrated peace, but the power of that demonstration came from your capacity to choose peace over conflict. Kethmar extended their hand towards Sarah again, moving slowly and deliberately. May I try once more? I believe I can now appreciate the beauty of human consciousness without being harmed by its intensity. Sarah looked at Captain Rodriguez, who nodded reluctantly. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward and allowed Kethmar to place their fingertips against her temples. This time, the contact was gentler. Sarah felt Kethmar's consciousness brush against hers like a soft breeze, exploring the edges of her thoughts without diving deep enough to cause harm. For a brief moment, she experienced human consciousness through alien perception, seeing her own mind as a brilliant, chaotic storm of activity where thoughts sparked like lightning and emotions blazed like stars. But instead of fear or pain, she sensed wonder from Kethmar. The telepath was marveling at the complexity, the intensity, the sheer aliveness of human thought. Through their connection, Sarah understood what made humans unique among galactic civilizations. They had not chosen between creation and destruction, but had learned to harness both impulses in service of growth and survival. When Kethmar withdrew their hand, both beings stood in silence for several moments, processing what had occurred. Remarkable, Kethmar whispered finally. Your species may be the most psychologically complex we have ever encountered. The violence that terrified me initially, I now understand it as the source of your incredible drive and determination. You are not peaceful despite your aggressive nature, but because of it, you have learned to turn the energy of conflict toward the pursuit of higher goals. Veltar stepped forward, their expression unreadable. Kethmar, are you saying that humans might not be a threat to galactic civilization? The telepath's response would determine humanity's future among the stars. Sarah held her breath as Kethmar considered their words carefully. I'm saying that humans represent something we have never encountered before, a species that has transcended the traditional choice between creation and destruction by learning to use both impulses constructively. They may be exactly what galactic civilization needs. The words hung in the air like a promise of possibilities Sarah had never dared to imagine. But before anyone could respond to Kethmar's statement, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Lieutenant Commander Webb rushed to his console, his face pale as he read the incoming data. Captain, we have multiple contacts appearing throughout the system. 15. No, 20 vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. They're surrounding us. Captain Rodriguez immediately activated General Quarters. Are they Zephyrian ships? Negative, Webb replied, his voice tense. These are completely different designs. Energy signatures match known classification. They're big, Captain. Much larger than the Zephyrian vessel. Sarah's heart sank as she realized what was happening. The quantum communications, she said to Veltar. You weren't just reporting to your homeworld, were you? You called for backup. Veltar's luminescence dimmed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as embarrassment. The Council of Minds required immediate notification of any species that could harm telepaths. When Kethmar was injured, emergency protocols were activated automatically. I could not prevent it. Dr. Mitchell was studying the tactical display that Webb had brought online. These ships aren't arranged in an attack formation. It looks more like a containment pattern. They're positioned to prevent anything from leaving the system. Kethmar moved closer to the viewport, their form flickering with distress. The Council fleet, they whispered. They have come to quarantine your species before you can spread beyond this system. Sarah felt the weight of humanity's future crushing down on her. All their efforts, all the coordination and sacrifice happening on Earth right now, and it might be too late. The galactic community had already decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. How long do we have before they act? Captain Rodriguez asked with military directness. Veltar closed their large eyes in concentration. I am receiving communications from the fleet commander. They are demanding immediate withdrawal of all Zephyrian personnel from human contact. The quarantine order has already been issued. Sarah's mind raced, trying to find some solution, some way to salvage humanity's future. Can you communicate with them? Tell them about what Kethmar just discovered. The Council of Minds operates on unanimous consensus, Veltar explained sadly. Once a quarantine order is issued, it requires the agreement of all 7-member species to overturn it. The process takes months, sometimes years. Webb's console chimed with an incoming transmission. It's from a fleet. They're hailing us directly. Put it through, Rodriguez ordered. The voice that filled the observation deck was unlike anything the humans had heard before, deep and resonant with harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the brain. The translation matrix struggled with the complex linguistic patterns, producing a voice that sounded like the intersection of wind, water, and stone. Attention humans of the vessel designated Research Station Kepler 442b. This is Fleet Commander Zarketh of the Galactic Council. You are hereby notified that your species has been classified as psychically hazardous. This system is now under quarantine. Any attempt to leave will be considered an act of aggression against galactic civilization. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in despite the desperate circumstances. Fleet Commander Zarketh, I am Captain Elena Rodriguez, representing humanity. We request the opportunity to address the Council regarding this classification. Our species wishes to demonstrate our peaceful intentions and our potential value to galactic civilization. There was a long pause before Zarketh responded. Your request is noted and denied. The injury to Telepath Kethmar constitutes sufficient evidence of your species' dangerous nature. Quarantine protocols are non-negotiable. Sarah felt desperation driving her to speak without permission. Commander Zarketh, Kethmar is here with us now. They can speak to your council directly about their experience with human consciousness. The initial contact was traumatic, but subsequent interaction has revealed important information about human psychology. Dr. Chun, Captain Rodriguez warned quietly, but Sarah pressed on. Our species may be psychically intense, but we have also demonstrated unprecedented coordination and the ability to channel our aggressive impulses constructively. Before you condemn humanity to eternal isolation, please allow us to complete our demonstration. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as she waited for the alien commander's response. Finally, Zarketh spoke again. You claim to channel aggression constructively. This is a paradox that requires explanation. Aggressive species destroy. Peaceful species create. These are fundamental principles of galactic civilization. Kethmar stepped forward, their luminescence brightening with determination. Commander, I request permission to address the fleet directly. My understanding of human consciousness has evolved significantly since the initial contact. Telepath Kethmar, you are severely traumatized by exposure to human thought patterns. Your judgment may be compromised. My judgment has been enhanced, Kethmar replied firmly. I have discovered something unprecedented among galactic species. Humans have not evolved toward either pure creation or pure destruction. They have learned to use both impulses simultaneously in service of growth and survival. Dr. Mitchell had been monitoring Earth communications throughout the crisis. Dr. Chun, he said urgently, Phase 2 of the demonstration is beginning. Earth Control reports that sporting events are starting worldwide. The coordination is incredible. They're conducting synchronized competitions across every time zone. Sarah turned to address the fleet commander directly. Commander Zarketh, we asked for just 12 hours to complete our demonstration. Watch how our species handles competition and conflict. See how we transform the energy of aggression into growth and achievement. The main display lit up with feeds from Earth, showing the most ambitious sporting demonstration in human history. Across the planet, millions of athletes were participating in carefully choreographed competitions designed to showcase humanity's ability to channel competitive instincts positively. In the Olympic Stadium in Athens, 10,000 runners were completing a marathon where the goal was not individual victory, but collective achievement. Participants were scored based on how much they helped other runners complete the course. In the Amazon basin, indigenous tribes were demonstrating traditional hunting skills, but instead of killing animals, they were using their expertise to tag and track endangered species for conservation efforts. Most dramatically, in orbit around Earth, human space stations were conducting war games using decommissioned military vessels. But instead of destroying each other, the competing fleets were racing to see who could most efficiently rescue simulated disaster victims and deliver humanitarian aid to mock crisis zones. This is what human aggression looks like when properly channeled, Sarah explained as the fleet watched humanity's demonstration. We compete fiercely, but we've learned to compete in ways that make everyone stronger. Kethmar had been observing the displays with growing excitement. Commander, observe the psychological patterns in these activities. Humans are experiencing all the emotional intensity of combat, the adrenaline, the determination, the tribal loyalty, but they are directing these feelings toward positive outcomes. Veltar added their own analysis. The coordination required for this global demonstration exceeds anything we have observed from non-telepathic species. They have achieved temporary collective consciousness through pure communication and shared purpose. Webb's console lit up with new readings. Captain, I'm detecting changes in the fleet formation. Some of the ships are moving to better observation positions. Commander Zarketh's voice returned, but it carried a note of curiosity that hadn't been there before. These competitive activities generate the same neural patterns as warfare, yet no harm is being done. Explain this paradox. Sarah seized the opportunity. Commander, humans discovered long ago that the energy of conflict could be transformed into the energy of achievement. We don't suppress our aggressive instincts. We redirect them toward challenges that strengthen our species rather than destroying it. The fleet commander was quiet for several minutes, presumably conferring with other council members. When Zarketh spoke again, their tone had shifted slightly. The council wishes to observe your species' response to actual crisis. Psychological studies indicate that true nature emerges under extreme stress. Before anyone could ask what that meant, Webb's console exploded with alerts. Multiple asteroid impacts detected in the outer system. They're large, Captain. Really large. And their trajectories. He paused, his face going white. They're heading directly for the planet Earth. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized what the council had done. You're testing us. This isn't a natural asteroid shower. Commander Zarketh confirmed her suspicions without emotion. Correct. The Council has introduced artificial obstacles to observe your species' true response to existential threat. Your planetary defense systems are inadequate to stop these projectiles. If humanity truly has the nature you claim, you'll find a solution. If not, the implication was clear. The Galactic Council had just sentenced humanity to prove itself or die. Dr. Mitchell was frantically coordinating with Earth Control. The asteroids will impact in 36 hours. Earth's defense grid can stop maybe half of them. The largest one alone would cause a mass extinction event. Captain Rodriguez was already activating emergency protocols. Contact Starfleet Command. Get every available ship to Earth immediately. We need to coordinate a system-wide defense effort. But Sarah was thinking beyond immediate military response. No, wait. Don't you see? This is exactly what we've been trying to demonstrate. The Council wants to see how we handle a crisis that requires both aggressive action and creative cooperation. She turned to address the fleet directly. Commander Zarketh, you want to see human nature under pressure? Give us real-time communication access to our homeworld. Watch how our species responds when everything we care about is threatened. Access granted, the commander replied. Observe, Council members. Let us see what these humans do when faced with extinction. What happened next would become legend throughout the galaxy. As word of the asteroid threat spread across Earth, humanity responded with a coordination that defied all previous understanding of non-telepathic species. The response was swift, decisive, and utterly unprecedented in galactic history. Military forces from every nation converged on the crisis, but instead of fighting each other for limited defense resources, they immediately began sharing technology and coordinating strategies. Corporate research facilities opened their most classified projects, revealing experimental technologies that had been kept secret for decades. Scientists who had been rivals for years began collaborating in real time, sharing data and theories without regard for credit or profit. Most remarkably, civilian populations around the world began contributing to the defense effort in ways that amazed even the humans themselves. Mining operations on the Moon and Mars donated their entire infrastructure to create mass drivers for deflecting asteroids. Private space companies volunteered their fleets for suicide missions. Citizens donated personal resources, precious metals, electronics, even family heirlooms, to the cause of building improvised weapons and shields. Look at the energy readings from Earth, Webb reported with awe in his voice. They're converting everything, power plants, industrial facilities, even household appliances, into components of a planetary defense grid. The entire planet has become one massive weapon system. But it wasn't just the scale of the response that impressed the watching aliens. It was the speed and efficiency with which humanity had organized itself. Within 6 hours of learning about the threat, Earth had essentially transformed into a single coordinated entity focused on survival. Kethmar was monitoring the psychological patterns of the human response, their luminescence pulsing with excitement. Commander, observe the neural patterns across the planet. Every human is experiencing maximum stress and aggression, but look at how they are channeling it. Instead of panic or violence against each other, they have achieved perfect unity of purpose. Dr. Mitchell was coordinating with the defense efforts when he made a startling discovery. Sarah, look at this. They're not just building weapons. 3 separate teams are working on ways to capture the asteroids intact. They want to mine them for resources. Sarah laughed despite the desperate circumstances. Of course they do. Humans don't just solve crises. We try to profit from them. We turn problems into opportunities. Veltar was studying the tactical displays with growing amazement. This is extraordinary. Most species faced with extinction either flee the system or fight desperately among themselves for survival resources. Humans are doing neither. They are treating the crisis as a challenge to overcome together. The battle for Earth's survival lasted 18 hours. The improvised defense grid managed to destroy or deflect most of the artificial asteroids, but the largest one, the size of a mountain, broke through the outer defenses and continued toward the planet. That was when humanity revealed its final surprise. Instead of attempting to destroy the massive asteroid, they captured it using a network of gravity manipulation devices hastily constructed from experimental physics equipment. The asteroid was slowed, redirected, and gently placed in a stable orbit around Earth. Commander Zarketh's voice returned after the crisis had passed, but now it carried unmistakable respect. Humans of Earth, your response to existential threat has been unprecedented. Not only did you survive a crisis that should have destroyed your civilization, but you emerged stronger and with new resources. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what had happened. Humanity had not just passed the test, they had redefined what the test could be. Kethmar stepped forward, their entire form blazing with excitement. Council members, what we have observed changes everything we thought we knew about consciousness and civilization. Humans do not choose between creation and destruction. They use destruction as a tool for creation. They turn conflict into cooperation, crisis into opportunity, aggression into achievement. The telepath paused, their large eyes meeting Sarah's. This species does not need to be quarantined from galactic civilization. Galactic civilization needs them. Commander Zarketh was silent for a long time before responding. The Council will need time to deliberate these unprecedented observations. The quarantine remains in effect pending our decision. How long? Captain Rodriguez asked. Unknown. But given what we have witnessed today, the deliberation may be brief. Prepare for the possibility that humanity's status in the galaxy is about to change dramatically. As the alien fleet maintained their positions around the solar system, Sarah looked out at the stars and realized that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy of joining galactic civilization, but more than that, they had shown the galaxy a new way to exist as a sapient species. The age of human isolation was ending. The age of humanity among the stars was about to begin.